Dear trading friends, I have discovered something incredibly exciting with Ethereum because it appears that a whale or an institution has placed around 200 million US dollars in long orders here, all within 1 day and 4 hours. We will soon see a connection here as well, which is why I suspect, though it's not a confirmation, just a suspicion, that it is one and the same person acting here. Because here, for every dollar from about 2,850 down to 2,800 US dollars, we can see that it's always roughly the same order size of 3.19 million US dollars. And all of this was placed at the same time, namely 1 day and 4 hours ago. And below that, sometimes it's a little less, sometimes a little more. We see here 3.17, 3.20 million, right? But we can also see here that orders have been placed together here, because if we go over there, that's exactly this big cluster that we see here. And for me, that's an incredibly interesting point. And I'll show you in a moment what else is very interesting about this, because the liquidation zone on the 3-day chart would land exactly in this area here. But what we also have, and why we keep seeing larger orders here in between, like here, for example, the 8.12 million at 2,830 US dollars. That's simply because orders have already been placed here before. For some reason, someone has now placed a very, very large order here. How big is it exactly? If we track this here again, we can see that there are now about 205 million US dollars in long positions waiting to be filled. At the same time in the spot market, and we're only talking about Binance here, you can see this is just Binance, not including other exchanges. And at the same time in the spot market, we have another 22.62 million US dollars that have also been placed here. For me, this is a super interesting area, especially in the context that if we look at Ethereum on the 3-day chart, this is exactly the liquidation cluster we have here. And someone is probably preparing to trigger this liquidation and at the same time trying to go long here with those 200 million US dollars. And that's exactly what I'm going to copy trade one-to-one today. I'll show you how I do it and where I do it. Specifically on PIONEX, using grid orders, not a grid trading bot, that's something completely different. There we have the option not just to place individual limit orders ourselves, but to actually predefine how the orders should be split up so that the long orders are then placed one after another. Why is that so interesting? I already showed you in the last video, and I have to be honest, if you copy my trades, it's not investment advice and there's no guarantee because we have quite a bit of liquidity below us, but also just above and below around 2,000 US dollars. There are an incredible number of orders. And at the same time, we also have this hyperliquid wall. This big red bar here, I already showed it in the last video, is at around 2,074 US dollars. If I zoom in again, we have about 190,000 Ethereum here, which are in a 5 times leveraged position and have a liquidation exactly in this price range. And not only that, why do I say I'm being cautious here? Let's go back to the liquidation map. This looks very interesting in the short term. Let's look at it on a 6-month basis. And we're not that far off yet. That's why I'm doing all of this with low risk. But here, from 2,500 to 2,300 US dollars, we have $1 billion cluster, a really large $1 billion cluster. And above all, these liquidation zones here, around 3,300 US dollars, actually go quite far back, namely starting from the 7th month of 2025. And we must not forget that. Of course, that could be interesting so that this gets triggered as well. And accordingly, I would prepare myself for that now. I've also marked that on the chart. That would be roughly the long-term Fibonacci, where we might wick into again. But if we really go in here and the whale doesn't cancel his orders, because that could also be spoofing, right? I'll show you in a moment what that means. But if we get a small reversal here, I would take profits in this small area. This is all just a test, right? Let's see how well this level 2 data that I just found here actually holds up. Because as I said, these could be spoofing orders. What are spoofing orders? That means orders are placed here to drive the market to this point, and right before it gets there, these orders are removed and the price can drop much further. Because there are a lot of people out there who use level 2 data to position themselves here, and basically these people are supposed to be tricked, even though spoofing is forbidden, but no one can prove why you withdrew your orders again. And what does that look like? How could that look? What could happen? We've already had a similar cluster here before. Do you see this here? And here we got wrapped in very briefly. Accordingly, this whale or institution might also not know exactly if it does break through how far it will go in, and that's why so many orders have been placed. But if it goes in here and then pulls out again, you could position yourself here together with the whales. Spoofing could look different, yeah? For example, here. Here for a long time, a few thousand Ethereum were put into a long position, and normally if the price goes here, let's say the price drops down to here, and just before that these orders are pulled out, well, then the price keeps dropping further. That's something that could happen. But in this case, it didn't happen because we didn't even get there in the first place. These orders were pulled out much earlier, the price went up again, and then dropped down into this price range. Yeah? But that's just a brief explanation of spoofing. If you're new to my channel, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Yeah? Let's keep growing together. I really put out a lot of very neutral trading content here. I also have a playlist here called Learn Trading, Step by Step to Becoming a Pro Trader, where I show you in detail all the tools I demonstrated in today's video and how you can use them. And all of this is completely free. You also get access to the level 2 data there. You'll find my simplest trading strategy, how you can predict price targets, and a lot more that can definitely help you advance in trading. And in the next video, I'll also show you my new strategy, how I'm trying to grow my current coins, which I'm not willing to sell at the moment unless we see higher prices using a very, very low risk strategy. And I'll show you all of this on PIONEX as well. By the way, if you're not on PIONEX yet, I'd of course appreciate it if you use my link and you'll get 50 US Tether as a gift, which you can use for a grid trading bot just for registering and completing KYC2. And then you also get a deposit bonus of up to 1000 US Tether, which you can also use to open a grid trading bot. That means you can simply open trading bots here completely risk-free without having to use your own capital and let them run. If you lose, nothing happens at all. But if they make a profit, that profit is yours. But now let's get back to the data because we know we have this liquidation on the 3-day chart. Maybe that will get triggered and then we'll have a reversal. Moving back to higher prices, that would of course be really nice. If not, I'm going to do all of this in a very, very low risk way and show you how I open my trades here and place them in almost exactly the same way as this whale did, plus another position to hedge myself and test that as well. But we know we have the whale orders here, which are very interesting. We have the liquidation level, which is also interesting here. And as long as these whale orders don't dissolve here, I'll stay in this position, but of course I'll also set a reasonable stop loss. But what does it look like at this point in time? I know the orders and how they are placed, but I also know that at 2,690, there's another 15 million, which is super interesting. But if these prices don't hold, then things get really interesting for me further down. First at 205, but also at 2,000. But for now, let's stick to the current range. If I go in now, and I'm doing all of this on PIONEX in this case, because I want to place it similarly to how this whale did, but in the form, and you can do this on PIONEX of grid, buy and sell. That means I don't have to manually place every single limit order like this whale did. Instead, I can specify it here in advance with an upper and lower price limit. I am limited to 20 grids, but that's fine with me. I don't have to include 50 of them, and I also have the option to decide how much I want to invest per grid, that is per buyback order. But of course, I want to know in advance roughly where my liquidation price will be so I can see approximately where my risk lies. First of all, when I go into PIONEX here, select USDTM and Ethereum, and of course I use isolated mode, then I still have my leverage option. In this case, I would even use 3 or 4 times leverage. And then there's the single asset mode. That's all there is to it. But if I now go back to limit and I know that from 2,850 to 2,800 is this whale's price range. I estimate that if I enter all of this, my average purchase price will be around 2,835. If I now say I'm willing to put in, for example, $1,000 of my own capital, that would be a $4,000 position size, as you can see. So where would my liquidation price be? At 2,138.36. However, since we still have orders here before that, or even the large liquidation I showed earlier at around 2,500 US dollars, I don't think we'll see a wick down to that level. Instead, we might get a reversal if this position doesn't work out. Again, this is very risky because I'm really just trying to copy a whale here. That doesn't mean this position will work out. If this person closes at a loss, then if you're copying the trade, you of course have to be able to handle the fact that you can incur losses when trading. But now I'll move on to grid buy and sell. And what do I know? I'll start all my orders at 2,850. My lower limit is 2,800 US dollars and I can set up to 20 grids. Personally, I use geometric. That means I have a consistent percentage gap at which purchases are made. Arithmetic would mean that there are larger gaps at the beginning, and the further down it goes, the smaller the gaps become. And then there's the question, how much am I willing to invest per grid? For example, if I say I'll use 40 US dollars. No, we can also do 50 US dollars, and then I have a total position, if everything gets filled, of 1,000 US dollars. With 4 times leverage, that's a position size of 4,000 US dollars that I'm now willing to risk, but of course I won't let it run into liquidation. Because if I see structurally that it keeps going down, if I see that we're not getting a reversal even at 2,500 US dollars, then of course I'll close these at a loss and enter again further down, thereby limiting my risk. So you can visualize what this looks like. When I click on open long here, you'll see in a moment that I have my orders placed exactly in this price range. I'll zoom in again so you can see it a bit more clearly. And that's exactly the price range where I've placed my orders. That means I now have orders placed with the grid from 2,850 to 2,800 US dollars at regular intervals. And depending on how much gets filled here, my average purchase price will naturally decrease accordingly. And the orders that aren't filled will, of course, remain in place. I can delete them afterwards if I want to, but now I'm set up in a similar way to the whale. However, I'm limited to just 20 of these grid orders here, so I'm entering 20 times without having to manually place limit orders myself, because let's not forget, what this whale did here was with a $1 interval. Of course, that's such a small amount that not all orders may be filled 100% since they are limit orders. That can happen here with limit orders. We definitely don't want to enter the market with market orders because then we'd have slippage that might work against us. So basically all I've done is try to enter here with a smaller amount with a little less than half the trades. And accordingly down here you can see all the individual orders listed showing the size of each order that's been placed. One is 0.071. Then 0.07. And that's what it looks like at the current moment. I'm really curious. But I also have to say, if we look at the chart analysis and go back to the Ethereum chart, if this level doesn't hold, I at least see the possibility of a reversal right here, where we already saw a strong influx of liquidity before. That means, of course, we could dip in here. If we break downwards, then of course I don't see anything particularly positive for Ethereum, because then we have this low here from the 20th or 21st of November, where a lot of order volume came in so that we could see a price increase again. And if we break through that to the downside, that would be absolutely not good, not even for the position. And then I'd have to consider exactly where to close it. What I'm going to do now to wrap up, which I forgot to mention, I'm setting an alert for myself because I want to watch this live on the chart, of course. Now I'll take a line here and place it right there. Of course, I'm using a price that's very close, just before it. Let's say, for example, 2,860 US dollars is where I'd like to get an alert if the price reaches that level, because then I'll sit in front of the chart. I'll get the alert on my smartphone, or if I'm at the chart, right here in TradingView desktop, so I can watch what happens. Not just to observe, but to act if needed. When the alert is triggered, I also want to know, are these orders still there and do they remain there or are they being removed? That way I can react accordingly. But what I'm going to do here is switch to a smaller time frame. I'll choose 15 minutes now because I want the alert to trigger once per candle. So I go in, right click here, select add alert and choose once per bar. I don't want it to be per bar close or anything like that. That should notify me as often as possible, so at least every 15 minutes. Here I enter my message and note, ETH long. I've set up my notifications once in the app, once here, but of course also with a sound, and then I click on create. And now I save it like this and have an alert set up. If we really go down, then I have the insight, I'm live on the chart, and can also see how things develop and whether these large orders are still there, so I can act accordingly. Exactly, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to leave a like. Let me know what you think about it, about the level 2 data, because it gives you such great insight. And see you next time.